My name is Jeff Johnson, and I have the pleasure of being your moderator this afternoon. We are going to have a fantastic conversation about the teaching profession, about why teaching is fantastic, about how to get engaged. You're going to hear the stories of those that are a part of the profession, some of the challenges about being in the profession, and some of the myths that we need to be able to overcome. The Teach campaign is an incredible campaign that is a partnership with Microsoft, with State Farm, the Department of Education, and others that is clearly designed to engage people all over the country from all different walks of life about being a part of the teaching profession. And so we're engaging undergraduates, many like yourselves that are coming out of school who are prepared in some cases to be career teachers. We're looking at those that can look at the teaching career as a second career or a third career. The bottom line is, how do we get great people in the classroom? How do we get great people committed to the teaching profession? How do we get great people in front of our young people? And how do we spread the message that teaching is not just a noble profession, but a necessary profession? And so we're excited to have a great panel that I will be able to introduce shortly. And how many of you right now, before we get started, have already decided that you're going to be teachers? All right, we got some work to do. How many of you are already teachers? We still have some work to do. How many of you are considering the teaching profession but aren't quite sure? We're getting there. How many of you just thought this would be a great session to come to and you're interested in hearing from the secretary? All right, we got some honest people. So we've got a great group that runs the gamut. I'm hoping that regardless of where you raised your hand, that if you have not yet decided to go into the classroom, that you will still, as a result of hearing the information today, encourage some other people to. If you have not yet decided, that you'll continue to look at education as a possibility. And understanding that even a step before teaching is just engaging a school that's near you, being a part of reading to young people, becoming a tutor or a mentor. There are so many opportunities, and we're going to hear from our panel. The first, and I ask please that you would hold your applause to the end. I know some of them have fans, and so please control your applause until they are all on stage. First is Bill Day. He's a 2014 District of Columbia Teacher of the Year and teaches middle school math at Two Rivers Public Charter High School. Next is Secretary Arne Duncan. He's the 9th U.S. Secretary of Education, and during his tenure, the department has launched a comprehensive effort to transform the teaching profession, amongst other things. Next is Kate Gasco. She's a graduate student in the Community Engaged Teaching Program at the George Washington University and completing coursework for her DC teaching license in secondary social studies. Next is Jen Badu Alaman. She is a National Board Certified High School English Resource Teacher from Gaithersboro, Maryland, and the 2012 Teaching Ambassador Fellow at the U.S. Department of Education. Some of you know Michael Foyer. He is the Dean of the Graduate School of Education and Human Development here at George Washington University. And last but not least is Joselle Cunningham. She's a reading and bilingual Spanish teacher from New York City and a 2013 Teaching Ambassador Fellow at the Department of Education. Please give them all a round of applause. Now, for those of you that are Twitter proficient, we will be engaging using the hashtag #MakeMore. If you're not Twitter proficient, we will have a session following this so that you can be more proficient at the next one. We also, you can follow this movement on Twitter at Teach.org. That's Teach.org. And so as we begin, and please don't hesitate to share your thoughts using the hashtag. I may even take some of your questions during this session. I want to really get into this and ask each of you, if you would, why teach? Why are you involved in this campaign? And as concisely as you can. Bill, we'll start with you.
I'm invested in this campaign because I need good schools. I need doctors, electricians, police officers that are responsible and compassionate, that are competent. I live in a democracy, I need my fellow citizens to be able to make informed choices. And I also want to be a part of empowering and elevating segments of our society that have been historically marginalized. And schools are the way that our society achieves those goals. And schools can only do that when they're filled with good teachers. So
this is a huge issue for a couple reasons. First of all, we have a generational shift. We have about 3 million teachers in our country, and over the next 4, 5, 6 years, the baby boomer generation is going to retire. We're going to need as many as 1 million new teachers in our classrooms. And our ability to attract and retain great talent is going to shape public education for the next 25, 30 years. So if we think great teaching matters anytime, and it does, it matters exquisitely now. And we have to bring in that next group of extraordinary teachers. Second, I think like Bill, I think of education, yes, education itself is hugely important, but I think of this as a daily fight for social justice. I think there's so many kids in so many communities who historically have been underserved. If we want to level the playing fields, if we want to get away from the haves and the have-nots, the only way I know to do that is through great public schools and great public school teachers. So if we want to give kids and communities a chance who have not had it for far too long, if you want to make a difference, the best place to do it is in the classroom.
Okay.
I'm a career switcher. I left my work in the nonprofit sector last May to pursue teaching, and although I had had an interest in teaching for a long time, I was really sensitive. I was younger, and I was very sensitive to the just a teacher rhetoric. People, friends, colleagues, even professors, sadly, would say things like, oh, you're smart, you're ambitious, you don't want to be just a teacher. You can do so much more with your life. And I think when we're really honest, that rhetoric permeates, and that rhetoric is harmful. And I admire the Teach campaign so much because it's seeking to directly combat that rhetoric. It's saying that we need smart, ambitious, but compassionate and kind professionals in this profession, which has a very precious role in our communities.
And I think that's the perfect segue, because I'm not a career switcher, I'm a career teacher. And I knew very early on that though I had a number of choices in front of me, teaching was just what I needed to do. And I want that sort of passion and that option to be available to more individuals as they're becoming young professionals and as they're considering what to do. So anything we can do to elevate the teaching profession and really give it the respect that I think it's due, I'm a big fan of. And so that's what brought me to the campaign.
Dean Foyer.
Well, I'm the dean of an education school, so you may not be surprised to hear me say that I think education is the single most important thing that our society needs to continue investing in. And I've got the historical and economic and other evidence to back that. The great quality of life that we have enjoyed in this country is largely the result of investments in education. The second part of this is that we now know that teaching matters. Now, most of us always thought that, but we now know it because of the data, because of the research, and that means that promoting teaching as the way to really have an effect on the future of this country is the thing that I think we should mostly be paying attention to. In real estate, they say, you know, it's 3 words, location, location, location. For teaching, it's impact, impact, impact. If you want to leave this world a better place than you found it, teaching is the way to try.
Joselle.
I absolutely agree with all of the panelists. It's a social justice issue. But I also think about my students. I taught 4th and 5th grade bilingual in the Bronx, and then 5th grade reading in Harlem. And I, with my first group of students, ended up looping, and looping is where you spend 2 years with the same group of students. And I found myself also keeping track of those students, checking in. I had one student say, "You're everywhere, Miss Cunningham. We need to get rid of you," right? But I also want to be part of a profession where I'm ready to hand my students off to the next group of dedicated professionals, and I want to invest in the future of this profession and make sure that when I think about my student Alan and whether or not he's focusing in class, or I think about whether or not Maria continues to struggle in math, I have the next generation to support those students.
Thank you all. I mean, as a communication specialist, I'm not in the teaching profession at all. But Secretary Duncan, we started talking about this when Teach.gov first launched. And the reason for me is because of Miss Roseberry. Miss Roseberry was my seventh grade English teacher. And I never understood what a teacher was supposed to look like until being in her class. I was empowered by her. I was inspired by her. I was deathly afraid of her. But I was educated by her. And as I've been a journalist and I've traveled around the world, almost every person you talk to that's doing something great, whether it's publicized or not, can point to a teacher that changed their life. And if we can have more of those Miss Roseberries in the classroom, then we're all better for it. And so Secretary Duncan, as we kind of transition and talk about some of those in this room raise their hands about thinking about the profession or wanting to be in the profession, how can they use Teach.org? How is it a functional tool to transition people into the profession?
Well, first, Jeff, I just want to thank you for your help. Jeff is just a passionate advocate. He's been everywhere we ask him to go, he goes. Places we don't ask him to go, he goes. And this is, I think, just very personal.
I show up invited. that can be scary.
Well, like Joselle, he is everywhere. He is everywhere and doing a lot of good, which frankly the media doesn't always do. And he is just at a different caliber than most folks in that profession. So I just want to thank you. So this is a huge attempt to elevate the profession, to strengthen the profession, to talk about the huge benefits for children of having great teachers, which you've heard a little bit about today. It talks about where the job openings are and trying to make it a much more transparent process. And it really is about trying to build a movement. And whether it's on this campus or on campuses around the country, we want the hardest working, we want the most committed students to think about going to education. And it might be a little bit non-traditional, might be a little bit different than what you are thinking about. But like Jeff, every single one of us, and if we ask you to raise your hands, I'm sure every single one of you can point to that teacher in your life that had a profound impact on you. And Jeff's point is, while that's all amazing, we need to get those numbers up. We need to have more of that, so it's not just that one, but it's that 2 or 3 or 4. And the dean talked about the evidence that data matters, and we know the average child with 3 great teachers in a row will be 1.5 to 2 years ahead. 3 bad teachers in a row, they may be so far behind they never catch up. That, for me, is simply unfair. It's un-American. And if we can sort of make excellence the norm, we'll be in a very, very different place. The final thing I'll say is I'm spending more and more of my time looking at the international comparisons, because that's where you guys are competing for jobs. And other countries just take this more seriously than we do. They pay their teachers better. They compensate them better. They reward them better. Singapore is doing an amazing job. You have to be in the top 30%, the top third of your graduating class to even be allowed to think about teaching. Think about the message that sends. In South Korea, they talk about teachers as nation builders. That's a pretty profound concept. Well, I think our teachers here on this panel, I think they're nation builders as well. And so this is a chance to try and start a movement to bring in the next generation of extraordinary talent and to do it together.
Joselle, can you build on that a little bit? Because with it being a movement, there's got to be a grassroots component. There's got to be multiple entryways. Can you talk about the kind of people that are coming in through Teach.org? And then more importantly, who are the folks that you're really trying to target to be a part of this movement?
Absolutely. So on campuses like George Washington University around the country, there are campus leaders that are really leading this effort and really making sure that the word gets out about Teach.org with a specific emphasis on African Americans, Latinos, and those who are interested in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Because we know, looking forward to the types of teachers we'll need in the future, that these are the types of students that we need to target. And then lastly, high-achieving students. And just to build on what Secretary Duncan said, the Teach.org is a place to link students to jobs around the country, but also how to leverage resources. So there are a number of grants that students can use to help to transition to the teaching profession, and Teach.org helps to point people in the right direction.
And with that pointing in the right direction, Dean, I mean, I think Secretary Duncan mentioned how we in the States view education versus other countries, and many students even in this room have almost been told what their major is going to be. I'm not pointing at anybody. How do we get the message out and change the narrative in a way so that parents, guidance counselors, other teachers are talking differently about the teaching profession in middle school, in high school, when they're deciding what career choices are going to be. That even as they're thinking about money and what they'll earn over a lifetime, that we're talking about the creative things teachers are doing to kind of buffer what the income may be just from teaching. How do we change the narrative in a way that begins to permeate the culture?
We're doing that here. Our basic view about this is that the world is changing, and that means that how we prepare people to function productively in a changing world means that we can't just talk about it. I mean, we don't just talk the talk. We are walking the walk here with actually trying to be as innovative in the way we are preparing future educators as we think they're going to have to be when they go into their places of work. Teaching is a complex profession. It requires a combination of what we call content knowledge. If you want to be a good math teacher, if you want to be a good biology teacher, we think you need to know some math and biology. Sort of obvious, but maybe it's not so obvious. In addition to that, there is what we call pedagogical knowledge. That means that there is a skill, there's a style, there is a set of attributes that really go into making one competent as a professional. Now, a very important component of this is the experiential side. We had the great good fortune here, you mentioned STEM, we had the great good fortune here of inviting something like 3,500 people to our campus just about a month ago, thanks to the great generosity of the Morgridge Family Foundation. We had this thing called Share Fair. We had people on this campus, actually just a few blocks away, working on some of the most innovative connections that make it possible for young people to actually want to learn. It made it possible for parents to learn with their kids. All of this is part of an era of innovation that is very central to the mission of preparing future educators. So there's a lot of work. And nobody should think that becoming a teacher is easy. Anybody thinks it's easy, you come and I'll have to disabuse you of that notion. On the other hand, of all the complex things to want to become good at, teaching will give you probably the most reward. And you mentioned about, some teachers you remember. We remember our teachers. I remember Mrs. Richards was in 4th grade, Mrs. Zimney was in 7th grade. And don't test me on this, because I can go through all of my six teachers in elementary school and my 3 in junior high but I'll tell you something more important. It's the teachers that we are turning out of here who really are making the difference. And I just had the great good fortune of being in the classroom of one of our recent alumni. She teaches world history in a middle school in Arlington. And I wanted to essentially stop everything I was doing and spend the rest of the day just in her class. 2 years ago, we had one of our graduates was the Arlington Teacher of the Year. So these are the kinds of things that we're promoting here to really make this a place that is just bubbling with enthusiasm about the prospects for education.
Kate, let me bring you in on this a little bit, because we're talking a lot about this recruitment piece, and a lot of times great teachers are the best commercial for the teaching profession. But how do we keep teachers in the classroom as well? Because so much of this is not just about recruiting new teachers. My wife is a teacher at a public school in Baltimore, and I can't tell you how many good teachers we see leaving the classroom because they're stressed, because they don't have support, a wide range of reasons. How can teachers as well as systems do a better job of retaining great teachers?
Sure, I definitely think that Bill and Jen would want to weigh in on this one too. Just at the very beginning of my career with teaching, I can already see that school districts that celebrate their teachers, that really value their teachers, want to see them achieve. Professional development is expected, it's built in. I think teachers learn best from other teachers. So when that professional development can be administered by other teachers, that is incredibly valuable. I also, I think that on the teacher prep part of it, there are many routes to the classroom. I think whatever route those of you thinking of going into teaching take, I would just recommend that it's practical heavy. that you're in the classrooms early and often, and you really see these challenges because they are there. All my student teaching experiences, all my practicum experiences have been in urban Title I school districts. The challenges are very real. You will have days that make you they'll break your heart when you look at what your students are going through, and it'll make you really mad that things are the way they are. And then you'll also encounter a lot of behavior that makes you really mad too at times. So I think it is important early on. I think how we train our teachers helps determine if we retain our teachers. And it's important early on to have as much of that practical experience as you can get.
Great. Bill, I want to, because we're crunched for time, but I want to bring you in on a nuanced area. So much of what Teach.org is about is identifying STEM teachers, African American, Latino teachers. There's some targeted areas. Why are those targeted areas so important in the recruitment process of bringing more folks into the profession? Right.
Well, the dean hit the nail on the head about the fact that if we want good STEM teachers, they need very strong content knowledge. A lot of the jobs that my students are going to be competing for, they don't even exist yet because the technology is moving at a speed that our schools are having trouble keeping up with. So we need people that have the latest knowledge to be in the classrooms to help impart that to our students. So that's really, I think, one of the big reasons why we're looking for STEM majors to join. I think the focus on African American and Latino teachers is important because we don't, as much as we want to say it, we don't live in a post-racial America. Like, students get very strong implicit messages about what roles they can fulfill in our society based on the people that they see fill those roles. So when a student is in school and sees that all their math teachers are white men, that tells them something about whether or not math is going to be a subject for them to pursue. So we really, really need to bridge connections, to bring a wider variety of individuals into the STEM field, the K through 12 teaching STEM field.
Jen, can you talk a little bit for me about just some things that you see working? We talk about innovation a lot, but some of the places where we're talking about innovation, we're not innovative. What are some of the transformative things you're seeing in your classroom that you're doing? And then, Secretary, if you can follow up and just talk about some things you're seeing across the country that are just best practices that you'd like to share.
Sure. I think we're at a really exciting time in education, especially with the push for college and career readiness and those very types of practical skills, but at the same time with the goals of being able to go to college, being able to access the kinds of careers in technology or other fields that students want. So I'm seeing that sort of shifting the way teachers are working now. I think the days of the sage on a stage are pretty much over, right? A few of us could probably remember some folks who were really great and passionate and lectured, but you don't do that too much now because there's definitely a lot of pushback, and it just doesn't get to the same goals, which is building the critical thinking in students and the ability for them to take the skills and make meaning of what it is you're trying to teach. So a lot of project-based learning, I think, is what we're seeing. A lot of partnerships with community networks, with organizations, even things like field trips. You know, I'm lucky. I'm right outside DC in Maryland. So when we're doing what could be a boring lesson on plagiarism and works cited, I can go to the museum and take students to talk to journalists about the ethics in media and how to be sort of literate consumers of what they're doing. So I think those kinds of pieces have been really critical in shifting. At our school in particular, a real focus on student discourse and academic vocabulary. Because we have very diverse populations and a lot of English language learners. So trying to make those skills very accessible and the standards very transparent for students has been exciting for me.
Secretary Duncan.
There's a lot out there that's very encouraging, but we have a long way to go. That's why we're all here. But to see high school graduation rates at all-time highs, see African-American, Latino dropout rates basically cut in half, see college going rates much higher. The trends are going the right direction, but we have to get better faster. So there's lots out there. I think the goal of every great teacher is not to teach, but to have their children actually learn. And Bill talked about data and technology, having real-time feedback, not once at the end of the year in May or June or July, but on a daily basis. What are my kids actually learning? So you're not teaching to 25 kids or 30 kids the same way, but differentiating in small group instruction, personalized learning. There's a huge amount of breakthrough there. The idea of moving away from just kids regurgitating, memorizing facts, but teaching them how to think. Again, they have to create and invent their own jobs and work in teams and having them solve tough problems and solve tough problems together. Huge amounts of good work going on there. And then I'm personally very, very interested not just in the academic skills, and this is a terrible name, someone needs to help me with a better name, but the non-cognitive skills like grit and resilience and the ability to handle adversity and work through that. And I would argue those skills are as important as the academic skills. And I think we're in our infancy in that, but many schools are starting to get in the game of helping our kids work through those tough things. So there's a huge amount of creativity, and frankly, so many of the sort of this next generation of leadership that you see on the stage is helping to lead the country, I think, where we need to go.
We want to get some questions from the audience, and we don't have a ton of time, so we want to make sure we can get as many as we can. I believe that there's some mics that will be circulating. As you all prepare to ask your question, there's just 3 simple rules. The first is don't touch the mic. It is statistically proven that you talk 20% longer when the mic is in your hand versus not. Second, ask a question. Third, ask a question. You will have 30 seconds in which to ask a question, at which time I will ask you to ask your question. That way we can get as many questions in as possible. Is there a question? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Dan, and I'm in a teacher prep program. And for the teachers on the panel, I'd like to ask, what do you think makes a great teacher, and what are your best tips and practice for those of us who are ready to dive into the profession?
I'll start with know your students. Get to know them. They're not a monolithic group. They have different interests, different skill sets, and the way that you can help connect them to the content that you're supposed to deliver is really to show them how they're capable of it and connect to it. The second thing is always get better. Teaching is unbelievable in that it gives you these opportunities to continually refine your craft. And if you're thoughtful and reflective about it, you get better every day, not to mention every year. So,
Kate, would you follow up on that?
Bill, I really appreciated what you said about how a teacher never stops growing. I'm the daughter of teachers. My mother's been teaching a Title I district for 40 years, almost. 35, she'd get mad if she were listening. And she's sometimes still the last one to leave the building. That's inspiring to me. I think I would also add on to that, be reflective, know yourself and take care of yourself, but at the same time, because particularly if you're going into a tough setting, you are not going to be good for your students if you're burned out. I think that we need our students, they deserve the best we have each day and our best energy levels, our most with itness, as we might say, in the teaching profession. So take care of yourself also.
Thank you. Question over here. There's no question. Where's our next question? Yes. Yes, sir.
But I'm from Chicago, Illinois. This might be more of a policy-oriented question. I apologize if you've covered it already. But my mom is a substitute teacher in the public schools there. And something that I noticed there is sort of a lack of incentive for teachers sometimes to go into more troubled neighborhoods. If you maybe could touch on some things to sort of equalize that playing field and incentivize more teachers to go to the neighborhoods that need more help.
Right.
Yeah.
We did not cover it, and it's a great question. It's one that I'm really passionate about. Obviously, ran the Chicago Public Schools for 7.5 years. And I think as a country, we have shown a lack of courage in this area. We have 15,000 school districts, urban, suburban, rural, remote, Native American. We have almost no school districts that systemically identify their hardest working, their most committed teachers and principals, and then moves them to the most underserved communities. In fact, 99% of the incentives are for talented folks to move to more affluent, wealthier I don't want to say easier, but they are easier places to work. And so there's a huge amount of work that we need to do. Some places like DC and others are trying to get in this game in, I think, some pretty important ways. But we have a long, long way to go. We need to make this the badge of honor. The culmination of a career is you have the privilege. You're the privilege, not the duty, but the privilege to work with the kids who need the most help. And we have to flip that.
Secretary Duncan, because one of the questions that came from the audience, because I'm reading you all's questions here, was about Teach for America. And so there's a lot of debate about Teach for America on both sides. My question as it relates to his question, though, is how are you partnering with other teacher preparedness groups to send kids and to send teachers into those areas? And then how do you get them to stay once they're there?
So just quickly, on this Teach campaign, TFA is a great partner, the AFT is a great partner, the NEA is a great partner. We have a whole set of teacher groups all working together. And my honest opinion that so many of these debates in education, I think, are what I call false debates. You just debate, are you preparing kids for college or careers? It's always both and. Is it traditional schools or charter schools? We just need more good schools. We have one common enemy. That's academic failure. And again, not everyone may agree. I'm for different routes into teaching. So whether they be traditional schools of education like GW, whether they're alternative routes and bringing great talent in from other walks of life in the STEM fields and others, we need that. We just need more effective teachers going into the profession. Over time, we need to be more honest in how we measure that and evaluate that. And those places that are producing fantastic teachers, we need those feeder systems to grow. Those places that are producing teachers that don't stay or can't work in tougher communities, we need to see them shrink. And so I'm very pragmatic, very agnostic in terms of what the source is. I'm just interested in what's happening in the back end.
Absolutely. Thank you. Question on this end.
So here at GW, our business school offers a gap year for those who participate in Teach for America. How do programs like TFA that offer education as a stepping stone into other careers fit into this movement?
So again, there's a debate on TFA, but they're trying to extend their commitment from 2 years to 3 years. And there's a pretty significant amount of data that many of their teachers do stay in education, whether in the classroom or not. And so I would love more teachers to stay for 25, 30, 35, 40 years like your mom's going to do. But whether you're in the classroom, whether you're a principal, whether you're running a school district, the woman who's leading the DC public schools now, Kyra Henderson, and I think is doing an amazing, amazing job. I'm a big fan. She came out of the TFA movement. And so again, I think we should, less us versus them, more let's get more great people into education wherever they're coming from.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Andre Towns. I'm a doctoral student in educational leadership and policy studies at Howard University. So my question is, how are we attracting teachers to make the profession look as glamorous as the medical field or the lawyers? Because the truth of the matter is, when you think about what will I earn as a teacher going into a school system, when I taught, my first year contract was $43,000, and I do remember one of my counterparts going into a government contracting job at $75,000, and I thought, am I in the right profession? But
no, it's a good question, and Dean, if you can chime in there, because the GW school is so sexy,
right?
It's how do we? But seriously, how do we make the profession seem more appealing when there's so much other competition on choices for careers?
Have any of you been in a law firm lately? I think being in a classroom has so much appeal. But look, the problem of the economics of this is really quite significant. We've got to figure out policy levers, policy strategies that can actually turn this equation so that people such as those assembled here who are contemplating a career in education, in teaching, don't have to always confront that thing about their neighbor going into hedge fund trading and making a lot more money for doing something else. And I don't have a short answer to that, other than to say that we here at GW are working on programs that can try at least to turn that equation a little bit more in the direction to favor the idea of going into teaching. And there are benefits to it. There are benefits to working with the kids. There are benefits to the kind of autonomy that teachers actually can exercise in the way they think, in the way they develop thinking and other skills, among others. There's a long list of attributes to teaching that we hope can compensate for some of the economic differential. Long term, I completely agree with the Secretary. We've got to figure out how to make teaching not only the exciting profession it is, but also a more lucrative one.
Giselle, can you chime in on this? Because some of the teachers that I see around the country are also teacher entrepreneurs. Who understand that they're only going to make a certain amount in the classroom, but there's other activities that they're doing outside of the classroom that are education related, that increase opportunities. Can you talk a little bit about what the teacher entrepreneur looks like?
Absolutely. So there are teachers around the country that are really thinking about creative ways to work in curriculum development, to work internationally. So for example, when I was a teacher, as a teacher, I spent summers in Madrid training new teachers that were in a university partnership that I worked with. I also worked in Sweden and other areas in Europe, in part because I wanted to bridge my love of travel and my love of teaching. And there are teachers around the country also that are starting small businesses to support their students, that have become grant writers at their school. And I think that the compensation issue is huge, and I don't want to minimize that. But I do want to say that there are times that I also remember, for example, at the end of my second year, I was thinking about my students and whether or not I had served them as best as I could. And I spoke to another teacher and colleague about it, and I was feeling a little down, and I said, you know, I really wanted to get better at this. And she called one of my students over, and she said, tell me what you think about Miss Cunningham at the end of the year. And she said, well, I would be nothing without Miss Cunningham, right? And she teared up, and she gave me a hug afterward. And she went on to explain some of the things that I had done for her that year. And I think that there is payment that you do get out of teaching, and I don't want to minimize, right, because that didn't put food on my table, right? That does not pay my bills, but at the same time, there is payment in that, and there is something that I bring home as a teacher.
We're going to get one more question.
Hi, Carrie Morgridge Family Foundation. I have a question about year-round teaching. And how do you guys feel about having a new system that could possibly, designed by you, created by you, what would that look like? And would you stay at your schools to teach year-round and maybe a new type of system and a new type of capacity? And then, Arnie, how do you feel about year-round teaching?
Jen, can you take that, and then Secretary?
Sure. One of the things, and I'm glad you bring this up, because every year I have to explain to my friends and family that though I'm a teacher, I don't work 10 months. Everyone always says, oh, you get the summers off. I don't. I actually work 11 to 12 months officially and unofficially. And I'm all for actually year-round schooling, provided that, and this sounds ridiculous, but it's not when you're dealing with the realities of a classroom and 30 bodies in there. There's air conditioning, and we have these sort of infrastructural pieces that can support that. But just being able to have my students year-round and being able to help them grow constantly and consistently, I see as an opportunity.
I couldn't agree more, and usually when I'm in middle schools and elementary schools, the kids throw tomatoes when I say this, but we in education move very, very slow, and our calendar, our academic calendar is based upon the agrarian calendar, and most of our kids aren't working in the fields anymore. And if we are serious about closing what I call opportunity gaps, not achievement gaps, many of our kids, not all, need more time. So that's Saturdays, that's summers, that's after school. And my kids, Jeff's kids, are probably going to be okay this summer and go to camps and do some things. Other kids just fall behind. We don't need another study around summer leading loss. So if we are serious about closing achievement gaps, the only way we do that is through opportunity gaps. And again, not for every kid, but in creativity, in a creative way, programming different students to meet their real needs, longer days, longer weeks, longer years. That's the only way we're going to level the playing field.
I've got one more question, and then we're going to do closing remarks, because again, that'll put us on time. I'd like each of you to think about what your 30-second commercial would be for the teaching profession, and either a teacher that meant something to you and why they were important, a few words that personify what makes a great teacher, or anything you would use in 30 seconds, to sell the teaching profession, and I'll be clocking you on those 30 seconds. But I'd like to ask Kate a final question. We've talked a lot about what makes a great teacher, but as I watch my wife come home and I look at some of my other friends that are teachers, you almost need a minor in child psychology because of the challenges that so many young people are dealing with outside of the classroom. And whether they're privilege challenges or challenges of poverty, kids are bringing issues into the classroom. How are we training teachers, or what do we need to do to ensure that the next generation of teachers are not just masters of pedagogy, but also masters of being able to deal with the realities of what these young people are bringing into the classroom?
That's a really excellent question, and I think it's hugely important because, as a few of us have alluded on, this is a social justice issue, and our kids are coming to the classrooms with very, very real stuff going on outside of our school walls. I would again echo that if a teacher is wanting to pursue a career within perhaps like an urban Title I district, that he or she does her training near an urban Title I district. The sooner we get into our classrooms, the sooner we just learn, and we don't necessarily, we take off our teacher hats and we become listeners. I don't know everything about your life. I can never know everything about your life, and I'm not going to make assumptions based on your address or your skin color or what you wear to school each day. I do think that my background, I worked in anti-poverty policy before I came to the teaching profession. That has been richly enhanced by my experience here at GW in what's called the Community Engaged Teaching Program, where in development and diversity classes, studying socioeconomic diversity was a central part of that. Whatever path, those of you, I can kind of see some maybe more interested heads after this panel, whatever path you decide is best for you to come to the classroom, be a listener and don't be an assumer. As Bill mentioned, get to know your students, and I think that's some of the best support we can give our students who are facing real tough things outside of our walls.
Thank you so much. Joselle, 30 seconds.
All right. So the first idea is the idea of cultural competence being critical as well. So Secretary Duncan mentioned non-cognitive skills, and Kate also mentioned really making sure that you get to know your students and that you are teaching in a district that matches your skill set, but really thinking about how to learn your students' culture and preferences is something that's huge. And I will just slip in, the only kindergarten argument that I've ever seen was the day after President Barack Obama was elected to his second term. And it's because one kindergartner went, Barack Obama got the most votes. And then the second one said, yeah, and I'm going to be president too. And then the other kindergartner said something to the effect of, no, you're not, because I'm going to be president, right? And this was in front of the bathroom. And less than 2% of the teaching profession right now consists of African American males. And I want to make sure that those kindergartners and others have role models in the classroom so that the arguments can now also be, I want to be a teacher, right? I want to be in education.
Thank you so much for those 2 commercials. Dean Foyer.
I'm not counting, but that was like 38 seconds. Well, I think education is, as I've said earlier, the activity in our society that has the best chance of keeping us together as a nation. What makes this country great is its diversity. If we don't figure out how to not only embrace the diversity, but to make sure that all of the great wealth that is embodied in this heterogeneous population of ours gets the advantages of competence, professional skill development, ongoing education, we're going to lose it. And right now we're dealing with a very, very significant, sad bit of data that we have allowed inequality, income inequality in this country to just go way out of control. And education is, first of all, one of the areas that's suffering the most from this. And second, it is the area where we have the best chance of trying to address it and maybe even reverse it. So if you want to make this country, you want to leave this country a better place than you found it, It's the investment in education with all of its imperfections and all of its challenges.
Thank you so much.
I think that social justice aspect is critical, and I think that's because when you boil it down, teaching is about empowerment. It's about your own professional empowerment and about the empowerment for the students that you teach. And I think keeping that as a focus is really important, because a lot of people think about that salary in the beginning, and I'm okay entering if I know there are opportunities for professional growth. And one thing I can say about teaching that I know isn't true for so many of my friends in other fields is that teaching challenges every aspect of who I am. It's both the academic and the professional, and it's the creative, the artistic side, the humorous side. All of it comes out because of what you do every day. And so I don't think at the end of any day, even as when it's the worst day possible, that I go back and think, man, I wasted a day. I always know that I've worked towards something bigger than me, and towards that movement, and that to me is critical.
Thank you. Kate.
We've talked a lot about the various challenges that the American teacher faces today, and yeah, it's a precarious landscape, definitely. And these challenges can seem so insurmountable, but even at the very beginning of my teaching career, I have seen and I can say that there are revelations in every classroom, and sometimes they're really big, but sometimes they're really small, and our tests don't always pick up on them, and they're easy for us to miss. But they can be as small as the kid who had his head down for the first week of school and he wrote off this class and this is just worthless, to he's asking a question mid-year and he's answering a question at the end of the year. And it's those revelations, they're all over. They're all over this city, I've seen them. I believe they're all over the country. And they should fill us with purpose and really energy for the future.
Secretary, I'm going to skip you and come back to you, give you the last word, Bill. Thought you had 30 more seconds, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, I would say, why do I teach? I get an opportunity to work hard on something that matters every day. And the primary beneficiaries of that hard work are right in front of me. And I get to know them, and I get to see them. I get to see them grow. They give me purpose. And they sustain me when the going gets tough. And I don't know if that's true of all the careers that are out there, but it's definitely true in teaching.
Secretary Duncan.
I don't know much to add. This has been pretty extraordinary, but I just think if you want to transform lives, as folks have said, if you want to challenge yourself every single day, and if you want to live a meaningful, fulfilling life, I can't think of a better place than education. I can say a lot of folks I grew up with have been done much better than I in terms of their financial wherewithal. I don't know if they've had as meaningful, as happy, or as fulfilling a life as I've been lucky enough to have. And if you put your heart into it, the dividends for your kids and dividends for yourself, I think are pretty extraordinary.
Thank you. There was a woman in my life named Elizabeth Clark. She was my great aunt, and she was a teacher for 60 years. And so at the age of 70, when she retired the first time, she decided that she would volunteer 3 times a week. And when she turned 80, they told her she couldn't come in 3 times a week. And she told them that they did not have a choice. She was going to be there. When she turned 85, she was still catching the bus to go to the school twice a week. And when asked, why at this stage in your life do you continue to go there? She said, what do you think continues to give me life? She said, I show up because the kids are there. Where else am I supposed to be? And I just think that there's an opportunity that whether you decide to go into the teaching profession or whether you become a part of an educational ecosystem that says we need good teachers in the classroom, and you encourage brilliant people to go into the classroom, whether they're coming out of secondary ed or whether they're going into higher education or whether they're coming back from the military or whether they're leaving Wall Street, wherever you see brilliant people who have a heart to serve and the intellect to share, we should be encouraging those brilliant minds to be in our American classrooms. And so become a part of this movement, not just because you want to teach or because you're a teacher, but because you know there are students all over this country that need somebody like an Elizabeth Clark that show up because the students are there, that give of themselves because the students show up, and that understand that the last piece of energy that I have, I'll recycle with a young person as opposed to sit by selfishly and save it for myself. Thank you all so much for joining us. Let's thank this panel for being a part. Please continue to use the hashtag #MakeMore. Follow the movement on Twitter @TeachOrg. And please go to the website teach.org. Thank you all so much and have a good afternoon.